It started with a rumble. Not thunder. Not distant traffic. A mechanical growl that crept through the floorboards of my home. The only thing left in this world that still felt like mine. I stepped out barefoot, the morning dew chilling my skin, and there they were. 6 bulldozers, 2 dump trucks, and a woman in a pressed gray suit tapping a clipboard like it was a weapon. Karen Prescott, HOA president, smiling like she was at a groundbreaking ceremony. Only thing she forgot was my consent. The machines weren't just parked. They were lined up like soldiers, one already revving its blade toward my fence. The same fence I built with my wife before cancer took her. That fence wasn't just wooden nails. It was memory. It was love. And now it was in the way. Karen didn't greet me. Didn't even pretend. Just waved a man over, broad-scarred, wearing a vest that barely hid the bad-shaped tan line on his chest. Dale Harlow, contractor by title, enforcer by nature. Karen pointed at my house. "This road is going through," she said, like I was some footnote in a plan I never saw. I told her she was mistaken. She wasn't. She said the HOA had voted unanimously to approve new community access, and that unfortunately my property, my legally owned, county-registered property, had fallen within the easement. I asked for documents. She waved her hand like I was a mosquito. Dale barked a command, and the first bulldozer started forward. I stepped in front of it. The operator hesitated. Karen didn't. She walked over, leaned close, and told me one sentence I'll never forget. "You should have moved when you had the chance." Then she stepped back. The blade roared to life. It didn't stop. It came straight at me like it wasn't machinery, but a message. I jumped out of the way as it tore through the first post of the fence, splitting cedar and throwing soil into the air like a bomb had gone off. Neighbors watched from their porches. Some filmed. No one stopped it. I screamed for them to halt. Dale laughed and said I could file a complaint if I felt uncomfortable. This wasn't uncomfortable. This was war. I ran back inside, straight to the crawl space. Pushed aside floorboards I hadn't touched in years. There it was, a binder, black, wrapped in plastic. Inside, the original architectural maps my wife had drawn by hand, bound with her initials, our land in full, and the conservation clause she fought to secure before she passed. They didn't know I still had it. Next to it, taped beneath the joist, was a small flash drive labeled Plan B. I took both, heart racing like I was back in the ER holding her hand for the last time. I knew then they weren't just trying to build a road. They were trying to erase her. My phone was already in my hand when I stepped back outside. The bulldozers had stopped temporarily, chewing through my yard like termites. I called one person, one voice I trusted with everything. "Bro, it's happening. They're doing it. I need you." No, I didn't wait for her to speak. I hung up and stared at Karen as she laughed with Dale like it was some kind of celebration. Like they'd already won. They hadn't. Not yet. Because what Karen didn't know was that my wife didn't just build this house. She built it on legal bedrock so solid, only someone truly desperate would try to fake over it. And desperate people make mistakes. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 years ago, in a locked room at the HOA clubhouse, a different kind of blueprint was drawn. Not for roads or gardens, but for silence. Karen sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by tired men with tired eyes. Papers slid across polished wood. Not a single vote. Just nods. The kind that don't show up in meeting minutes. They erased my property that night. Back in the present, Ria stood in my living room, staring at the wreckage in disbelief. The garden was gone. My late wife's roses, shredded and churned into mud by steel treads. Ria didn't speak. She just took the flash drive from my hand and plugged it into her laptop. I watched her face harden with every click. The files were clean. My wife's maps. Her original contract with a county. A signed conservation clause granting the land historical status, undisturbable for 40 years. We still had 7 left. But something didn't add up. Ria opened the online registry. My property was gone. Not marked sold. Not transferred. Just gone. Like it had never existed. We drove to the county office. The clerk behind the glass had a twitch in his eye. He looked at the paper we handed him like it was a grenade. Then he typed slowly, deliberately, until his screen showed nothing. No record. No match. No Ethan Cross in the system. I slammed my fist on the desk. He flinched, then leaned in. They came last winter, he whispered. Said your name was a mistake. Said your wife never filed the right permits. I asked for proof. They brought cops instead. We stepped back from the window. Ria tried logic. Lol. Threats. He just looked scared. Said if he talked, they'd come for his kids. The file room was locked. The cameras pointed away. We were wasting time. Outside, our car waited. Or it had. 2 tires shredded. A nail strip still lying in plain view. On the windshield, duct taped in broad daylight, was a folded piece of yellow paper. Keep digging, and you'll be buried in it. Ria looked sick. I picked up the note and folded it without a word. We didn't speak on the drive back. At the house, I opened the original property file again. Something clicked. In the margins, faint pencil marks, coordinates. Not from the county. From my wife. She must have sensed this was coming. We followed the numbers to the edge of the woods. A flat stone rested near the stream bed. Beneath it, wrapped in layers of waxed cloth, was a second copy of the contract. This one signed by the State Environmental Board. Their seal. Her signature. The date. This wasn't just protected land. It was federally recorded. Ria took photos, scanned it all. She was shaking now. Her eyes wide, not with fear, but fire. They forged county records, committed fraud across multiple jurisdictions, and then tried to erase the only physical proof left. She swore under her breath. I asked what was wrong. If this clause is real, she said, then they have to get that road built and functional before the expiration, because once that clause renews, it's locked in forever. They were racing the clock, and they were ahead. We drove to the local paper. A small building with one tired editor and a cat on the front desk. He took one look at the footage of bulldozers and laughed. Said no one reads OS stories. But when we showed him the erased maps and forged documents, he paused. Then his phone rang. He went to the back room. Didn't come out for 20 minutes. When he did, his hands were shaking. I can't run this, he said. Ria pressed him. He just handed back the flash drive and walked us out. We stood on the sidewalk in silence. She looked at me like the ground was shifting under our feet. We're not just dealing with HOA corruption, Ethan. This is deeper. Someone's funding this, and someone higher up is making the calls. I asked what we do next. She didn't hesitate. We take it to court. We fight, but we do it fast. Because if they break ground past the foundation line, your house becomes a construction zone. And legally, you lose all protection. I looked back toward the house, toward the broken fence, the torn earth, the silent windows. They weren't just building a road. They were building over a grave. And I wasn't going to let them finish. The courthouse smelled like bleach and forgotten promises. We filed the injunction just after dawn. Ria handled the legal side, her voice sharp, her hands steady. I sat in silence, gripping the contract we'd unearthed like a lifeline. Time was bleeding fast, and every second we weren't in court was a second the bulldozers could chew through another piece of my life. Karen wasn't in the courtroom when we arrived. She was already outside, smiling for a local camera crew like she was unveiling a park, not paving over a man's memories. Her speech was short. Something about progress, about community access, about how the final hurdle had been cleared. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Ria grabbed my arm as I stepped forward. Not yet, she said. Let them speak first. Let them lie. Inside, the judge reviewed the paperwork with eyebrows slowly climbing his forehead. When he hit the conservation clause, he stopped. Looked at me, then looked at the county representative. A woman in a blazer stood up. Her badge read Planning Division. Her face read fear. She fumbled through some legalese about how our copy was outdated, how the federal database had no record of such a clause. Ria interrupted her mid-sentence. We backed this up on 3 external drives. 1 submitted to the Environmental Board this morning. 2 in safekeeping. This isn't just a legal clause. It's a living contract. The room went quiet. Then Karen walked in. She didn't wait for permission, just marched up the aisle like it was her courtroom. She dropped a manila folder on the table. The judge opened it. Inside, blueprints, permits, approval letters with matching signatures. Ria leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Those aren't real," she said. Karen smirked. The county rep looked confused. But the judge noticed it too. 2 pages in that folder had slightly mismatched headers, the kind of detail only someone desperate would overlook. One had a date format that didn't match the official state template. The other had a signature dated a month before the original application was even filed. Forgery. Karen's smirk faltered. The judge didn't speak for a long time. Then he closed the folder and said one word. "Investigation." Karen turned pale. The county rep looked like she wanted to disappear. We walked out of that courtroom not with a victory, but with time. A court order was filed to halt all construction pending review. Any equipment caught moving would be seized under obstruction. But it wasn't over. Because when we got home, the lock on my front door was snapped in half. Inside, everything was wrong. Drawers open. Photos missing. The safe in the wall ripped clean out. Even the floorboards beneath the crawl space had been torn apart. The secondary copy of the contract was gone. But they missed something. Ria had left one flash drive hidden in the rain gutter behind the house, wrapped in foil, taped inside a plastic bag. It was untouched. We backed it up again, sent it to 3 different reporters, 2 judges, and 1 environmental watchdog. That night, I sat in the ruins of my living room watching the news. No coverage, no mention of the court order. Just another local puff piece about community development, long-awaited progress. But then Ria got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end didn't threaten. It warned, "You think this is about land? It's not. Walk away, or your next injunction will be your obituary." Then it hung up. Ria didn't flinch. She hit record. Saved the message. Sent it straight to the state attorney's office. But I looked out the window. A black SUV idled across the street. No plates. No lights. Just waiting. They weren't backing down. They were getting started. And now they were watching. Always watching. We didn't sleep. Ria set up motion sensors across the yard while I reinforced the back door with steel brackets I hadn't touched since the last hurricane season. Every shadow outside felt like a threat. Every engine down the road sent a spike of adrenaline straight to the spine. By morning, the SUV was gone. But in its place stood something worse. Private security team. Unmarked uniforms. Earpieces. Blank stares. They were stationed at the end of the block with clipboards in hand, logging every movement in and out of my street like it was a military checkpoint. Karen stood beside them, her suit freshly pressed, her arms crossed like she was daring someone to question her authority. The construction tape was back up. The judge's order was clear. No machinery, no groundwork, no interference. But Karen wasn't using county equipment anymore. These trucks were private, contracted under a shadow company that didn't show up in any public database. The names on their vests weren't real. This wasn't just civil disobedience. It was tactical defiance. We recorded everything. Every tire track. Every fake ID badge. Ria used a drone to capture aerial footage. The footage didn't lie. They were preparing to breach the foundation line by the end of the week. And if they got that far, it would be irreversible. Ria called the attorney general. No answer. She emailed 3 state reps, 1 bounced back. 2 didn't reply. We were screaming into the wind. That night, the power went out. No storm. No explanation. Just black. I lit candles while Ria ran diagnostics off a portable battery. She was halfway through tracing the smart meter logs when her laptop screen froze. A message appeared, white text on black. Stop. Then it shut itself down. We stared at each other in the dark. Our breath the only sound. Then the knock came. Not on the door. On the window. We moved slow, flashlights off. There, pressed against the glass, was a manila envelope with duct tape. I opened the window, grabbed it, and pulled it inside. Inside the envelope were photos. Dozens of them. Me, Ria. My wife, back when she was sick, sitting in the garden we built. Dates scribbled in red ink. Angles from inside the property. From rooftops. From trees. We weren't just being watched. We had been watched for years. Beneath the photos was a single sheet of paper. She knew. She tried to stop it. They silenced her. I dropped it like it burned. Ria picked it up and read it again. Then her face shifted. She pulled up the original contract, the one signed by the state board. In the corner, next to the seal, was a second set of initials. Not mine. Not hers. MC. Marla Connor. My wife's sister. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. Not since the funeral. Ria insisted we find her. It took all night, but by morning we tracked her to a small town 4 counties over. She worked in a flower shop. Lived alone. No online presence. When we pulled up to her street, I felt like I was walking into a ghost story. She answered the door with a look of panic. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They followed me once. I moved twice. I'm not doing this again." But Ria held up the photos, the note, the contract. Marla stared at them for a long time. Then she stepped aside and let us in. The truth came slow. Before my wife died, she had filed an anonymous tip with a federal land trust. She suspected fraud in the HOA, unusual land purchases, quiet payouts, backroom meetings that never showed on records. But she got too close. A week before she passed, she told Marla she found something: buried deeds, falsified votes, a paper trail that linked Karen to a shell corporation involved in real estate laundering. My wife planned to go public. She never got the chance. Marla tried to follow up after her death, but a man in a dark suit showed up at her job, showed her photos of her apartment, and told her to forget the past. So she did, until now. We left her with a burner phone and instructions. Ria would file a whistleblower report using her name, protecting her under federal witness protections. It was dangerous, risky, but it was all we had left. As we drove back, I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. The battle wasn't just about a road. It was about erasure. They weren't trying to win land. They were trying to erase the people who stood on it. One family at a time. The road construction resumed at dawn. This time, they brought floodlights and concrete mixers. No county seal, no permits displayed. Just a swarm of men in unmarked gear working fast, like they were racing a storm no one else could see. Ria called every enforcement agency on the list. No one picked up. When she finally reached someone at the State Environmental Board, the line went dead the moment she mentioned Karen's name. We weren't in the legal zone anymore. We were in the quiet war. I drove out to the edge of the property, stood between the foundation line and the first bulldozer. The driver didn't move. Just revved the engine once, then turned it off and stepped down. He didn't speak. Just walked away. Karen approached with a folder in her hand and a smugness that seemed surgically installed. She said nothing for a moment, just looked at the house like it was already gone. Then she handed me the folder. Inside were 3 things: an offer for a buyout, a non-disclosure agreement, and a typed letter stating that if I refused, the HOA had full intent to proceed under eminent domain, using an emergency clause triggered by a falsified natural disaster claim. They fabricated a flood. They created a paper emergency. And they were going to bulldoze my home under the disguise of public safety. I tore the papers in half. Karen didn't flinch. She leaned in and whispered something I'll never forget. "This land never belonged to you. It never belonged to her. It belongs to Progress." Then she walked back to her car, as if that was the end. It wasn't. That night, Ria and I staged our own press conference. We streamed it live from the roof of the house. She read every document aloud, line by line. The forged signatures, the erased registry entries, the threatening phone calls, the envelope of surveillance photos. Everything. By morning, it had over 1.2 million views. And one message from a federal investigator. He requested a private meeting. We agreed. The man who showed up wasn't in a suit. He wore boots and a faded field jacket. His badge was real. His demeanor wasn't friendly. He asked 3 questions. Was the property line in dispute? Did we have original documentation? Were we prepared to testify? We said yes. He nodded once, then left. That afternoon, the truck stopped moving. Karen disappeared. The private security detail was gone within hours. Then the subpoenas came. Not just for the HOA, for the county office, the environmental board, the planning division. A full federal audit launched by the Department of the Interior. They weren't just building an illegal road. They were covering up a 10-year land laundering scheme involving kickbacks, bribes, and criminal mismanagement. The final blow came 2 weeks later. The court ruled the property was permanently protected under federal conservation laws. Not only was construction banned, the HOA's right to govern over that zone was officially revoked. Karen was arrested for fraud, falsifying public records, and obstruction of a federal investigation. The foundation trench was filled in. The roses were replanted. And for the first time in years, I stood on my porch without a target on my back. But the scars remained. Not just in the torn soil or broken windows. In the trust that had been shattered. In the silence my wife carried to her grave, trying to warn me before they closed in. I planted a new tree at the property line. One of her favorites. A symbol that this house, this land, would never be silent again. People drive by now and slow down. Some wave. Some stare. A few walk up and say thank you. They thought a road would erase history. But all they did was build a path straight to the truth. And we made sure the whole world saw where it led. Like, share, subscribe. Weeks passed, but the echoes didn't fade. Even with Karen behind bars and the court ruling in our favor, the battle left cracks beneath the surface, places law couldn't reach. Ria and I stayed cautious. Cameras remained. Alarms stayed armed. The neighborhood had shifted. The silence wasn't peace. It was fear. Neighbors began knocking, one by one. Some brought old documents, HOA letters, sudden fee increases, threats made in writing. One man admitted he was told to spy on our property. A single mother said her backyard was flagged for beautification, then bulldozed days later while she worked double shifts. This wasn't one house. It was systematic control disguised as community. And now that the spell was broken, people were finally willing to talk. Ria organized a town forum in our backyard. No permits. No HOA approval. Just folding chairs, one mic, and truth. It started small. 10 people. Then 20. Then someone streamed it live. By the end of the night, over 200 neighbors had shown up or tuned in. Stories poured out. Threats for overdue assessments that were never owed. Home additions ripped out under fake code violations. Elderly residents forced into selling for pennies under legal pressure they couldn't afford to fight. Karen wasn't alone. She was the face. But the machine was bigger. We formed a coalition that night. No more hiding. No more passive silence. Ria drafted a legal roadmap, how to audit the HOA, how to recall leadership, how to demand transparency. The next morning, someone spray-painted across my garage door. You made this public. We'll make you disappear. It wasn't just graffiti. It was personal. The handwriting matched one of the forged letters we'd submitted to the court. A signature I knew too well. Derek Slater, the HOA's legal counsel. The man who had never shown his face in public, but had signed every document Karen used. We tracked his address through old property records. A house 3 counties over. Listed under a Shell LLC. Surveillance cams on every side. He was still operating, still watching. Ria wanted to take it to the press again. I said no. This time we'd walk in. We knocked just after sunset. He opened the door half an inch, then froze when he saw the camera in my hand. We know, I said, and now so does everyone else. He didn't deny it. He didn't speak at all. Just shut the door. 3 days later, he resigned. Every lawsuit, every shady contract suddenly started unraveling. Half the HOA board fled their posts. A forensic audit revealed almost a decade of misappropriated funds, ghost invoices, and developer kickbacks. The state dissolved the HOA's authority over the entire subdivision. A new association was voted in by the people this time. No closed meetings. No secret signatures. No silence. As for the house, we kept rebuilding. I restored the porch my wife loved, planted vines along the fence she once traced with her fingers. The garden bloomed again, not because we won in court, but because we didn't let them erase her memory. That was the real war, not for land, but for the right to remember. And still, it wasn't over. One night, while checking our cameras, Ria paused. Someone had left a note in our mailbox. No envelope, just a folded page. It said, "There are more like her. Follow the deeds. Dig deeper. It's bigger than you know." And at the bottom, one word scribbled in red ink. Phase 2. We thought we ended the story. Turns out we only exposed the first chapter. The word haunted us. Phase 2. It wasn't a threat, it was a blueprint. A signal that the fight we thought we ended had only scratched the surface. Somewhere behind the crumbling facade of the HOA and Karen's arrest, a larger machine still turned. Ria couldn't sleep. I stopped trying. We dug in. Old county records, abandoned infrastructure plans, archived HOA blueprints. And then it appeared, hidden in plain sight. A master zoning map, drafted a decade ago, color-coded. One section marked red, our neighborhood. Another in yellow, 5 blocks south, scheduled for commercial transition. A third zone, larger than both, marked in gray, labeled only future utility corridor. We cross-referenced land sales. Dozens of homes had been quietly bought under false pretenses. Families pushed out over small code violations, fines stacked until they had no choice but to sell. And who was listed on the holding company paperwork? Not Karen. Not Derek. It was a name we hadn't seen before. Harlan Wexler, a former infrastructure developer, disbarred from public projects a decade ago, now operating as a consultant under a dozen different aliases. He was buying land through shell companies, using HOA pressure as leverage. He had mapped the entire neighborhood as the site of a private energy pipeline. Gas, not community. Profit, not people. He was behind it all. The HOA was just his tool. Karen was just a puppet. We had to expose him. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous it got. Ria's laptop was remotely wiped while she slept. My phone locked up during a call with a journalist. Our drone was shot out of the sky over an empty lot that once held a home. One night, a black SUV followed us for 9 miles. It didn't try to hide. It didn't overtake. Just followed. Then vanished. We weren't fighting a homeowners association anymore. We were threatening a network with millions at stake. Ria prepared a data dump, every document, every piece of evidence, every voice recording. We encrypted it and uploaded it to a public server with timed release. If anything happened to us, the world would know. And then we made one final move. A live stream. We walked through the old construction zone, past the trench that never became a road, past the foundation markers still buried in the dirt. Ria narrated every step, every lie, every paper trail, every family displaced. At the end, I stood beside the garden and held up the original land deed signed in my wife's name. The real one. The one they tried to bury. This land is not for sale. Not for silence. Not for fear. The stream reached over 2 million viewers in 6 hours. By morning, state prosecutors reopened 3 investigations. A whistleblower from inside Wexler's firm came forward. Leaked documents confirmed the plan to covertly seize the entire subdivision through HOA manipulation. The fallout was instant. Wexler was arrested on federal racketeering and conspiracy charges. News trucks lined the street. Neighbors cheered. Strangers sent messages of support from across the country. We didn't just win. We ignited something. A movement. Communities across the country began auditing their own associations, asking questions, tearing down the silence that had ruled their neighborhoods for too long. And in our backyard, beneath a tree I planted for my wife, Ria placed a small plaque. It read, "This land remembers. This land resists. Asterisk, asterisk." That was the final page. But it wasn't the end. Because stories like this don't end. They echo. They inspire. They warn. Like, share, subscribe. Let them hear it.